always thought I was the one who read people well. 40 years of teaching high school history in Columbus, Ohio will do that to you. You learn to tell the difference between the kid who didn't study and the kid who studied hard but froze. You learn to see which parents actually showed up for their children and which ones just showed up for appearances. You develop a kind of radar, a quiet one, not dramatic, just there, running in the background, the way a smoke detector sits in the corner of a room you almost never look at. I trusted the radar, and I trusted my son. That was my first mistake. Not the trusting. That part I'll never apologize for. The mistake was thinking that trust meant I didn't have to keep watching. My son is 41 years old. His name is Troy. He has his mother's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a combination that has never worked out well for anyone in this family. His wife, Natalie, is someone I tried hard to like. I want to be honest about that. I tried. She's efficient. She's organized. She has opinions about everything from nutrition to property taxes, and she shares them whether you asked or not. When my late wife Evelyn was still alive, Natalie kept a polite distance. But Evelyn passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. And after that, the dynamic in my family shifted in ways I didn't fully understand until much later. Troy called me in late January, maybe 6 weeks into the new year. He said he'd been thinking about me alone in the house. Said the winters in Columbus get long. Said he and Natalie wanted to get me something for my birthday that would help me feel more connected, safer, more comfortable. I was 67 at the time. I wasn't confused. I wasn't fragile. I still drove myself to appointments. Still walked 2 miles every morning. Still played cards on Thursday nights with a group of men I'd known since my 30s. But I was alone in a 4-bedroom house, and I suppose that image, a retired man rattling around by himself, made for a convincing narrative if you needed one. He brought over a smart home hub, one of the nice ones, a brand I recognized from commercials, the kind that sits on your kitchen counter and listens when you talk to it, controls the lights, plays music, reads the weather. He also set up a doorbell camera and 2 small cameras in the hallway and living room. He said it was a safety thing. He said if I ever fell or needed help, someone would be able to reach me. I want to tell you I was immediately suspicious. I wasn't. I said thank you. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to help him with his homework, and he walked me through all the settings. He showed me how to ask the hub for the news. He was patient. He seemed happy. I remember thinking, this is what it looks like when your kid grows up and starts taking care of you, and I felt something warm about that. He spent about 2 hours setting everything up. At one point he said he was also installing something on my tablet, the one my daughter, Renata, had bought me the Christmas before, so that I could video call the grandkids more easily. I nodded. I didn't look over his shoulder. I trusted him. He left around 6 that evening. I made myself dinner, watched the news, went to bed. The house did seem a little less quiet with the hub on the counter. I'll give him that. His name was Felix. We'd been friends since 1987. We met at a summer basketball league in Clintonville. I couldn't play to save my life, but I showed up every Tuesday and he respected the commitment. Felix had spent 12 years doing network security work for a financial services company downtown before he retired. He was a kind of man who explained things clearly without making you feel stupid, which is a rarer quality than people acknowledge. He came over in late February, maybe 3 weeks after Troy had set everything up. We were going to watch a basketball game and order wings, the same thing we'd done probably 300 times over the years. He walked in, set his jacket on the chair, looked at the hub on the counter and the small camera mount in the hallway corner. He didn't say anything right away. We watched the first quarter. During the timeout, he got up to get a glass of water and stood in the kitchen longer than he needed to. When he sat back down, he looked at me in a way that I recognized. It was the same look he'd given me in 1994, when I told him I was thinking about buying a certain piece of property. Calm, considered, not alarmed, but attentive. "When did you get the home system?" he asked. I told him Troy had set it up for my birthday. He nodded slowly and said nothing for the rest of the half. At half-time, he set down his glass and said, "I'd like to take a look at your tablet if you don't mind." I handed it to him. He sat with it for maybe 10 minutes, tapping through screens I didn't know existed, going into settings menus I'd never opened. I watched his face. He was reading something, and his expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He put the tablet face down on the coffee table. "Frank," he said, and then caught himself. "Sorry, old habit." He called me Frank sometimes. Long story. "Who has administrative access to this system?" I told him Troy set it up. He picked up the tablet again and turned it toward me. There was an application running in the background I had never seen before. A remote access app. The icon was small and grey and generic looking, the kind of thing your eye would skip past 100 times. "This has been active since it was installed," he said. "Someone with the login credentials can see the screen on this device remotely. What's on it, what you type, when you use it, what applications you open." I looked at it for a long moment. "Is it Troy?" I asked. Felix said he couldn't confirm that without more digging, but that whoever installed the app would need physical access to the device to do it. He said it wasn't a virus, wasn't something that got there by accident. Someone put it there deliberately. I sat back. The television was still on, halftime analysis, some commentator talking about second-half adjustments. The sound seemed very far away. "Don't remove it," Felix said. I looked at him. "Not yet. If they know you know, they lose their reason to stay predictable. Right now you have something they don't know you have." He said it quietly. Not like a movie. Like a man who had worked in security for 12 years and understood that the first move is rarely the right move. I asked him what I should do. He said, "First, tell me, have you had any conversations on that tablet about your finances, your will, your property?" I thought about it, and my stomach went cold. 2 weeks before Troy set up the system, I had met with my estate attorney. His office was downtown, a man I'd been working with since Evelyn and I bought the house. We had updated my will after Evelyn passed, and then I had called him again in January because I was considering adding Renata's name to the deed. She had 2 kids, a mortgage of her own, and I was starting to think about what made practical sense for the family long term. I hadn't told Troy about the January meeting, but I had made a follow-up appointment on my tablet. I had written a note to myself about it on the Notes app. I had, on one afternoon when the house was quiet, typed out a rough list of thoughts, not a legal document, just thinking out loud, about what I might want to do with the property, the savings account, Evelyn's jewelry, the car. Felix read what was on my face. "Okay," he said. "This is manageable, but you have to let it breathe." He stayed another hour. He walked me through what the remote app could and couldn't see. He suggested I use my tablet as if nothing had changed, but to be deliberate about what I typed on it going forward. He explained that whoever was watching would be looking for information about money, legal decisions, anything that might affect what they stood to inherit. "Don't make your real moves on that tablet," he said. "Don't call your attorney on that phone. And do not let on to anyone that you know anything at all." I told him that was going to require some acting. He gave me a half smile and said, "You taught teenagers for 40 years. I think you can manage." The next 6 days were the longest of my life. Troy called me twice during that stretch. Normal calls. Asked how I was feeling, mentioned the grandkids, said Natalie wanted to know if I'd be coming to their place for Easter. I sat at the kitchen table during those calls and answered the same way I always had. I asked about the kids. I said Easter sounded fine. I talked about the weather. I mentioned, casually, that I was thinking about redoing Evelyn's old study. Turning it into a reading room, maybe. I said I'd been looking up contractors on the tablet. None of it was true, but it was the kind of nothing information that would satisfy someone who was checking in for reasons they didn't want to name. I did not mention my attorney. I did not mention Felix. I made my actual calls from the landline in the kitchen, the one I'd kept for years out of habit, and suddenly felt grateful for. I called my attorney from that line. I explained the situation as clearly as I could. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something I wrote down afterward because I didn't want to forget it. He said, "If someone has been monitoring your communications in order to influence decisions about your estate, that creates a legal exposure for them that they may not have fully thought through." He told me to document everything. He said not to change anything visible in my estate plans yet, nothing on paper, nothing that would register through normal channels, but to come in and see him in person without using the tablet to schedule it. I went on a Thursday morning, told no one, took the bus downtown instead of driving so there was no car in the parking lot to recognize. We sat in his office and I told him everything I knew. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You've done this exactly right so far." I didn't feel like I'd done anything right. I felt like a man who had made coffee for his son and watched him set up equipment to spy on him. But I kept going. The thing about betrayal from someone you raised is that it doesn't arrive like a storm. It doesn't knock you down with force. It seeps in slowly, the way cold air comes through a bad window seal. You know something is off. You keep pulling the blanket tighter, and then one day you realize you've been cold for months and just kept adjusting instead of fixing the window. I thought back to the year after Evelyn died. Troy had come over more frequently then. He'd helped me sort through some of Evelyn's things. He had at one point asked me some questions about the house. Not aggressive, just questions. Who was I thinking of leaving it to? Whether I'd talked to anyone about a trust? I'd answered honestly, the way you do when you think someone is asking out of care. I thought about Natalie and how her questions had a particular shape to them. Always framed as concern, always landing just adjacent to money. "Are you still using the same financial advisor?" she'd asked me once. "Aren't there better options? Have you thought about what makes sense now that it's just you?" I had thought those were the questions of a daughter-in-law who paid attention to things. I was sitting in my kitchen one evening about 9 days after Felix's visit, and I had the tablet open. I was typing deliberately and carefully a note to myself that I knew someone else might be reading. I wrote that I was feeling overwhelmed by the estate decisions, that I wasn't sure I was ready to make changes, that I might just leave everything as it was for now and revisit it next year. Every word was calculated. I closed the tablet and sat in Evelyn's chair, the good one, the leather one she'd had reupholstered 3 times because she refused to replace it, and I stayed very still for a long time. I wasn't angry exactly. That came later. What I felt in that moment was grief, not for what was happening but for what it meant about the years behind me. Every holiday dinner, every birthday phone call, every conversation that I now had to go back through with new eyes, looking for what had been taken versus what had been given. It's a terrible thing to audit your own memories. 3 weeks after Felix first noticed the app, Troy called to say he and Natalie were thinking about coming by that Sunday. "Just to check in, have lunch," he said. I said that sounded fine. Felix came over Saturday night. He had done more digging during the weeks between, spoken with a contact of his who still worked in the field, and he laid it out for me simply. The remote access app on my tablet had been accessed 17 times in the past month. The hub on the counter was registered to an account under Troy's email. The doorbell camera footage uploaded to a cloud account he controlled. Every notification I'd gotten on my phone about someone at the door, Troy had that same information in real time. My own front door. Felix asked me if I wanted to go to the police. I sat with that question. There's a particular kind of decision you face when the person who wronged you is someone you love. The law is one path, but the law is one path, but the law is loud, and once you start down it, you don't control where it ends up. I thought about my grandchildren. I thought about the fact that I had raised Troy. had been at every game, had paid for college, had sat with him in a hospital waiting room when his first child was born, and cried in a way I hadn't expected. I thought about all of that, and then I thought about Evelyn's chair and the cold air through the window, and all the questions that had been shaped like concern. I told Felix not yet, but I wanted the documentation. He had already started compiling it. Sunday lunch. Troy brought sandwiches from a deli we'd gone to since he was a kid. Natalie brought a fruit tray. The grandkids ran through the living room the way grandkids do, completely indifferent to everything except the dog next door, who sometimes came to the fence. It was a normal afternoon, on the surface. Somebody watching from outside would have seen a regular family having a regular Sunday. I watched Natalie's eyes move to the tablet on the counter. Just once. Quick. The kind of glance you make when you're checking on something without wanting to be seen checking. I had left the tablet there on purpose. I had left a note open on the screen, visible if you walked by, about a contractor estimate I was supposedly getting for the study renovation. Something to occupy the narrative. Something that pointed a way. After lunch, while the grandkids were in the backyard, Troy sat down across from me and asked, with what sounded like genuine warmth, how I was really doing. I told him I was doing fine. Said I'd been sleeping better lately. Said Felix and I had gotten back into our Thursday card games. He nodded, said that was good to hear. I looked at my son, 41 years old, his mother's eyes, and I said, I feel like everything is exactly where it needs to be. And I meant it. Not because I'd made peace with what he'd done, but because I was no longer the person in that room who was operating without information. He didn't know that I knew, and knowing that he didn't know, that was the whole ballgame. The following week, I went back to my attorney's office with Felix. I brought the documentation. Felix had it organized cleanly, logged by date and access point, the kind of thing that would hold up to scrutiny. My attorney reviewed it and made copies. He told me that what had occurred likely constituted unauthorized access to a computer system under Ohio law, and that the intent influencing estate decisions gave it additional gravity. He asked what I wanted to do. I told him I wanted 3 things. First, I wanted my estate plan revised completely, with Renata included in the deed and an updated trust structure that removed ambiguity. Second, I wanted those documents stored at his office, with no digital trail back to my tablet. Third, I wanted to send a letter. Not to the police, not to a judge, to Troy. My attorney drafted it with me. It was not a long letter. It didn't list every detail or make accusations in the tone of a legal threat. It simply stated that I was aware of what had been installed on my devices, that I had documented it, that I had updated my estate plans accordingly, and those plans were now in the care of my attorney, and that if Troy wanted to have an honest conversation with me, as my son, my door was open. It was mailed on a Tuesday. Certified return receipt. I don't know exactly when he read it. I know the receipt came back signed 3 days later. He didn't call me that week, or the week after. It was Natalie who called, actually, about 10 days later. Her voice had that careful quality it gets when she's been thinking about what to say for a long time. She asked if we could talk. I said yes. She said she wanted to explain. I said I was listening. She talked for a while. I won't repeat all of it, but the shape of what she said was this. They'd been worried. They hadn't trusted my judgment. They thought someone, a friend, a woman, she didn't say who, might be influencing my decisions about the estate. They'd done what they did out of protection. That word, protection, I let her finish, and then I said, Natalie, you install software on my devices to monitor my private thoughts about my own finances and property. Whatever story you've told yourself about why it doesn't change what it was. She was quiet. I said, I'm not interested in punishing anyone, but I'm also not going back to the way things were. It has been several months now. Troy and I have spoken twice since the letter. Both times were short, formal in the way that new boundaries feel formal. I don't know what happens next between us. I hope it gets better. I have to hold that hope loosely without leaning on it too hard, because hope that you grip too tightly has a way of becoming a different kind of trap. Renata knows the whole story now. She came over on a Saturday and I told her everything from the beginning, and she sat at the kitchen table without speaking until I finished. Then she said, "Dad, I'm sorry you carry that alone." And I told her I hadn't been alone. Felix had been there. She brought over a cutting board she'd been meaning to give me for months. Maple with a little groove for catching juice. It sits on the counter now next to the space where the hub used to be. I returned that to Troy in a box with no note. The cameras are gone too. The tablet has a different operating system now. Felix helped me with that. I still walk 2 miles every morning. I still play cards on Thursdays. I made myself a good dinner last Sunday. Pork chops, roasted sweet potato, collard greens, the way Evelyn used to make them. And I sat at the kitchen table and ate it slowly, and the house was quiet in the way it always is, and I noticed that the quiet didn't bother me the way it sometimes does. Some of you listening know exactly what I mean when I say this. You've had the experience of sitting in a room that should feel like home and feeling like a stranger in it. Like the walls know something about you that you don't know yet. Like things are in motion around you that no one has announced. If you feel that way right now, trust it. Not paranoia. Attention. There is a difference, and it matters. I am a retired school teacher from Columbus, Ohio. I am 68 years old. I kept the heat lower than I should have for years because Evelyn always said I ran warm, and I never changed the habit after she was gone. I have a daughter who brings me cutting boards, and a friend who noticed what I missed. I thought I was the careful one. Turns out I just needed reminding of what I already knew, that the people who love you pay attention to you, and the people building a case pay attention to what you have. Learn to tell the difference before the folder opens. I keep thinking about the moment Felix put that tablet face down on my coffee table. He didn't slam it. He didn't raise his voice. He just set it down, quietly, the way you set something down when you've already decided what it means. That image stays with me more than any of the harder moments that came after. What happened in my family didn't happen because Troy was a bad person from the beginning. I've had to sit with that. It happened because he made a series of choices, small ones at first, then larger ones, and at no point did anyone stop to ask whether what they were doing was right. Not just legal. Not just explainable. Right. That's the word that got lost somewhere along the way. And when you lose that word, you can convince yourself of almost anything if the stakes feel high enough. That's what I've come to understand about how people end up where Troy ended up. It's rarely one dramatic decision. It's a slow drift, a quiet erosion of the line between what belongs to you and what you only want to belong to you. He told himself it was protection. Natalie said the same word on the phone, and maybe at the very start there was something genuine in that, but somewhere the intention curdled, and they kept going anyway. That's the part that requires a kind of honesty to look at directly, the moment when you know something has gone wrong and you continue. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. Felix saved me not just because he knew what to look at in a settings menu. He saved me because he had the kind of mind that stays sharp and the kind of character that doesn't look away from what it sees. He could have said nothing. It would have been easier. We could have watched the second half, eaten our wings, gone home. He chose not to, because he understood that what he noticed mattered, and that staying quiet about it would have been its own kind of wrong. I have thought about that a great deal. Integrity isn't dramatic. Most of the time, it looks exactly like what Felix did, a man sitting with a tablet for 10 minutes and then saying quietly what he found. And then there was the waiting. 3 weeks of phone calls with Troy, of Sunday lunch, of typing careful nothing onto a screen I knew someone else was reading. People ask me how I did that without breaking. I don't have a clean answer. What I know is that I made a decision, one clear decision, that I was not going to be reactive, that I was going to stay steady long enough for the truth to have room to breathe. That's not something that comes from nowhere. It's something you build over decades, the same way you build anything that holds weight. You practice it in smaller moments until you have it when you need it. What I want to say to anyone listening who might be feeling something they can't quite name, unease in your own home, a question that keeps surfacing, a gift that feels slightly off, is this: your instincts are not paranoia. Pay attention to what they're telling you, and then, when you know something, resist the urge to react before you're ready. The moment you act out of pure emotion, you hand over the only advantage you have. I'm 68 years old. I live alone in a house in Columbus with a maple cutting board on my counter and a tablet running a clean operating system. I have a daughter who showed up and a friend who stayed. I have the quiet back, the real kind, not the kind where something is running in the background you don't know about. That's enough. Some days it's more than enough.